what about things like archaeology? What does archaeology say? And it turns out that this is absolutely stunning. In fact, one of the big problems has been, several of the major issues that have been having to be dealt with because of the theories that the Book of Mormon happened down in Central America. First off, the Mayan civilization predate Lehi's arrival by hundreds and hundreds of years. And there's no indication in the Mayan civilization there was any kind of a major disruption around 400 AD when the Nephites were completely exterminated. So the time frame doesn't really match up. The DNA, we already know, does not match up at all. There were Asians down in Central America during the Book of Mormon time frames. And then if we add in, for example, in the Book of Mormon, 43 different times, there's a lady by the name of Amber Lee Nelson who has actually done some amazing research on the laws of Moses, but the laws of Moses were being actively lived by the Nephites for almost 600 years. And in fact, they lived it strictly. And 43 times they talk about the fact that they were living the laws of Moses, which require certain things like animals and plants. For example, they have to have sheep to offer as sacrifices. They have to have goats. They have to have grapes and wheat and barley, all of which are integral to the 7 holy convocations that they practice throughout the year. So these animals and plants are required by the Lord actually in Deuteronomy and so forth in the Old Testament. And the Book of Mormon specifically said that they were doing these things. But those plants and animals don't even exist in Central America. And they never did, at least during the Book of Mormon time frames. The Mayans never had sheep. They never had goats. Grapes, wheat, and barley won't even grow in Central America because it's the wrong climate. But all of those things are indigenous to North America. So if the Book of Mormon happened in North America, all those things are already covered. And in fact, we have evidence. In fact, most people have, a lot of members of the church, and in fact, most Americans are not aware of this ancient civilization that was here in America prior to the European establishment of the Europeans coming over and so forth, explorers. But there's a civilization that's called the Mound Builders. And these Mound Builders built, we have now from the best non-LDS textbooks on this that they've discovered, they now are estimating that there was over 1 million cities, fortifications, embankments, ceremonial centers that basically encompass the entire Mississippi River Valley and the Ohio River Valley. That central portion of the United States of America was the lands of a massive civilization that was there. They date this civilization, it's called the Middle Woodland period. The civilization begins to rise and show up in the archaeological record about 550 years before Christ in the southwestern part of the United States. And then from there, basically right off of Tallahassee, Florida area, and then they moved up into the southwestern portion of the Appalachian Mountains and established themselves there for several hundreds of years. And then they moved over into the Mississippi River Valley, and then up into the Ohio River Valley, and the civilization continued to thrive and flourish until 400 AD, when, for unknown reasons, archaeologically, they don't know why or what happened, but the massive building that they were doing, the roads, the structures, and so forth, the burial mounds and temple complexes and things that they built during that approximately 1,000-year history abruptly ended at 400 AD, which is coincidentally the same time frame as the final battle between the Lamanites and the Nephites, exterminating the Nephite civilization at 400 AD. So it matches the time frames perfectly. I mean, just beautifully. It also then makes it easy access to the final battles would have been up in the Hill Cumorah in New York, and there's been all kinds of speculation there was more than one Hill Cumorah. But nowhere in the Book of Mormon does it ever state anything about a second Hill Cumorah. In fact, quite the opposite is true. They talk about the Hill Ram of the Jaredites was the same hill as the Hill Cumorah of the Nephites. So they go back to the same hill, and that was the sacred repository of their records. And of course, we know from different accounts from Joseph Smith that Joseph Smith took men into the Hill Cumorah there in New York. There was a room of records. They said there were wagon loads of plates. There was 8 different men that went into that room and saw those things, and including even the sword of Laban was there. Okay, so this is the sacred repository of the ancient records, and it was there at the Hill Cumorah in New York. Well, that's a long ways away from the Mayan civilization down in Central America. So how did they get wagon loads of plates up here to New York if that was the case? And there's no reason to think that there was 2 Hills Cumorah, because the Hill Cumorah in New York matches every description that we have. I mean, after all, they didn't call it the Mountain Cumorah. They call it the Hill Cumorah. So it wasn't a mountain, it was a hill. And anyway, so there's a lot of different aspects of that. Archaeologically speaking, one of the biggest problems that we've had, and a lot of people have lost their faith over the fact that when they look down in the Mayan civilization, the mainstream archaeologists in the Mayan civilization, they find no evidence that they were doing any metalworking or smelting during that time frame. The Mayans didn't really get into metalworking until about 800 to 1000 AD. But the Book of Mormon said that they were smelting metals clear back at 550 BC, after Nephi left Lena and Lemuel and decided that they needed to defend themselves. So the interesting thing about that is that if there was smelting going on in Central America, finding steel tools, for example, or steel swords would not be. Nobody would expect to find steel swords because they would rust completely away with the wet the damp climate down there in Central America. But the smelting process always leaves slag, and that slag doesn't go away over even a course of a couple of thousand years. It's going to still be there. But they've never found any slag to indicate any kind of smelting or any artifacts of either gold, copper, silver, or iron that were done at that time frame. And so that's been problematic. People have pointed that out, and anti-Mormons have pointed that out too. And people have lost their faith because of the fact that the Book of Mormon specifically said they were smelting, and there's no evidence for that in Central America. On the other hand, you come up here to North America, and we have places like the Man Hopewell site, just off of the Ohio River in Indiana, and they have found evidence for smelting. We have the smelters themselves have been found in the Ohio River Valley. At least over 35 of them have been discovered with the actual oven that was covered up with dirt. Afterwards, the oven's still there. The slag is still there. What isn't there is the iron artifacts, but what we do have, the Book of Mormon talked about having breastplates and head plates and shields and protection, from that aspect. None of that has ever been found in Central America that dates in the Book of Mormon timeframes. In contrast to that, we take people back to, there's at least 4 or 5 dozen museums in the central portion of the United States where we can take people in and actually show them the head plates and the breastplates. And guess what they call them? Head plates and breastplates, because they find them on the skeletons, on their chest and on the top of their skulls. So we have hard evidence from the metallurgy